Berlin, Germany, January 12, 1936. The winter sun barely penetrated the tall windows of the Bendler Block, headquarters of the German Army High Command. General Ludwig Beck, chief of the Army General Staff, sat at his massive oak desk, hands clasped over a freshly arrived intelligence report from agents in America. The document described in technical detail a new semi-automatic rifle developed by a Canadian-American engineer named John Garand at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. The rifle, designated M1, had been officially adopted by the United States Army just 3 days earlier, on January 9th. Beck read the specifications with growing disdain. Semi-automatic, 8 shots, gas-operated system, complex, too heavy for field use, prone to jamming. He shared the report with his aides, and the room filled with restrained laughter. The Americans, always so obsessed with mass production and speed, had wasted precious resources on a weapon that violated all principles of modern warfare. German doctrine, refined through decades of experience since the Great War, was crystal clear. Concentrated suppressive fire through MG-34 machine guns, with riflemen armed with the magnificent Carabiner 98K bolt action, providing disciplined precision fire. The K98K was simple, robust, accurate, the embodiment of German superiority in weapons design. Why complicate what already worked perfectly? A major present in the room articulated the general consensus. The Americans equip their soldiers with rifles that fire as fast as they eat their chocolate bars. But speed without discipline isn't effective fire. It's ammunition waste. A German soldier with 5 well-placed shots is worth more than an American with 8 wild shots. Beck nodded, setting the report aside. There were more important matters to address. The rebuilding of the Wehrmacht was underway. France was the real enemy. This American rifle was irrelevant. What Beck couldn't comprehend was that the Americans weren't just changing rifles. They were revolutionizing the fundamental philosophy of infantry combat. The M1 Garand wasn't an improved rifle. It was the democratization of firepower, the transformation of each individual soldier from marksman into suppression unit. While the Germans perfected 19th century tactics, the United States was inventing 20th century fire warfare. By placing rapid and sustained fire capability in the hands of every rifleman, the Americans would eliminate dependence on heavy machine guns and create tactical flexibility that no Axis army could match. Combined with mass production of unimaginable industrial dimensions and unparalleled reliability under any combat condition, the Garand would make each American soldier equivalent to a complete small suppression unit. Beck's arrogance was about to be confronted by the most brutal mathematics in modern military history: the multiplication of industrial force applied to warfare. The mathematics of defeat were already being written in production spreadsheets that no German general could comprehend until it was too late. Between 1937 and 1945, the United States produced 5,468,772 M1 Garand rifles, with approximately 4.5 million manufactured during the war years alone. Springfield Armory alone produced 4,188,669 units. Winchester Repeating Arms contributed 513,180 rifles between December 1940 and June 1945. In January 1944, at peak production, Springfield Armory alone was producing 122,001 rifles in a single month, 3,136 rifles per day, 164 rifles per hour. This meant that every hour of operation, Springfield Armory produced more M1 rifles than it produced in an entire day just 4 years earlier. Standardization was total. Any part from any production line fit perfectly in any rifle. Complete interchangeability across millions of units. This wasn't craftsmanship. It was industrial engineering in its purest and most devastating form. Germany, in contrast, produced approximately 14.6 million Carabiner 98K during the entire war, an impressive number in absolute terms, but one that revealed the fundamental disparity. The Germans were producing bolt-action rifles because they couldn't mass-produce semi-automatic rifles. Their attempts with the Gewehr 41 resulted in fewer than 145,000 units at most of which never reached the front lines due to catastrophic reliability. The Gewehr 43, introduced in 1943 after studying captured Soviet SVT-40 rifles, was better, but still only 402,213 units were produced until the end of the war. Less than 500,000 German semi-automatic rifles against 4.5 million American M1 Garands. The disparity wasn't in engineering, it was in industrial capacity. But production numbers tell only half the story. The other half lies in rate of fire. A German soldier armed with a Kar 98K, operating the manual bolt action after each shot, could fire 10 to 15 rounds per minute while maintaining reasonable aim. An American soldier with an M1 Garand, simply pulling the trigger repeatedly, could fire 40 to 50 rounds per minute while maintaining similar accuracy. This was a 3 to 4 times disparity in volume of fire per individual soldier. Now multiply that by a platoon. An American platoon of 40 men could deliver 1,600 to 2,000 rounds per minute. An equivalent German platoon, 400 to 600 rounds per minute. A 3 to 1 disparity in sustained fire volume at the basic unit level, and the production cost revealed American pragmatic genius. Each M1 Garand cost $85 to produce in 1943 and required 6.5 hours of machine tool work. It was only marginally more expensive than the simpler K98K, but offered 3 to 4 times the volume of fire. The Americans had solved the problem that plagued weapons designers since the invention of smokeless powder: how to produce reliable complexity at mass scale. The answer lay in the design from the beginning. John Garand had spent 16 years developing his rifle, and his genius wasn't just in the gas system or the reloading mechanism. It was in designing the entire weapon for mass production from the first draft. Only 60 moving parts. Simple enough for assembly lines. Robust enough for any climate. Reliable enough for average soldiers under extreme stress. John C. Garand, born in Quebec, Canada, emigrated to the United States when young and eventually found employment at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. In 1919, he began working on semi-automatic rifle designs, a process that would consume the next 2 decades of his life. His first prototype, the Model 1919, used a primer-actuated recoil system. It was unconventional and ultimately unreliable. Tests in 1925 at Fort Benning against competing designs from Berthier, Hatcherbang, Thompson, and Pedersen produced inconclusive results. Garand went back to the drawing board. In 1927, he developed a gas-operated variant in .276 caliber. Testing continued through 1928, but no clear winner emerged. American military bureaucracy, notoriously slow and cautious, continued demanding refinements. Garand persisted. On April 12, 1930, he patented his gas-operated system, the technical foundation of what would become the M1. 6 more years of development and testing followed. Finally, on January 9, 1936, the United States Army officially adopted the rifle as the M1. Mass production began at Springfield Armory in 1937. The first deliveries to the Army occurred in 1938. It was only 100 rifles per day initially, but America was building the industrial capacity that would transform the world. What separated the M1 Garand from all other semi-automatic rifles of its era wasn't just its gas system or its mechanical reliability. It was the design philosophy that prioritized mass production from conception. Garand understood something that most European weapons designers couldn't comprehend. In modern industrial warfare, the rifle that can be produced in millions and still function reliably is infinitely more valuable than the rifle that is technically superior but can only be produced in thousands. The M1's gas system used expansion of gases from the fired cartridge to automatically cycle the action, eject the empty case, and load a new round from the chamber. The N-block clip system allowed reloading in seconds. The shooter simply pushed an 8-cartridge clip through the top of the receiver, and the action closed automatically. When the 8th cartridge was fired, the empty clip was ejected with a distinctive ping, and the rifle was ready to receive a new clip. Simple, fast, efficient. Springfield Armory and Winchester. Repeating arms mastered mass production techniques that fragmented German industry never managed to replicate. Assembly lines moved at constant speed. Components were produced with tolerances so precise that interchangeability was guaranteed across millions of units. A rifleman in Guadalcanal could take parts from a damaged rifle and install them in another without adjustment. This was mass production elevated to the level of industrial art. During the war, Springfield Armory's workforce grew from 1,500 workers before the war to more than 13,000 at peak, operating 3 shifts 24 hours a day. Notably, 43% of this workforce were women, the women ordnance workers, or WOWs, who filled all production functions from heavy forging to stock manufacturing. America had democratized not just firepower, but also war production. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands, October 24, 1942. The battle for Henderson Field had entered its most desperate phase. Sergeant John Basilone and his machine gun section faced waves of Japanese infantry attacking through the jungle in an attempt to recapture the crucial airfield. Basilone's heavy machine guns fired in bursts, cutting through the Japanese lines, but the volume of enemy fire was overwhelming. 3,000 Japanese soldiers were attacking American positions. Ammunition for the machine guns was running out. One barrel overheated and failed, then another. Basilone's section was on the verge of collapse. He ran through enemy fire to fetch more ammunition, returning to his men while bullets cut through the vegetation around him. But even with the machine guns operational again, positions were in danger of being flanked. It was at this moment that American riflemen armed with M1 Garands demonstrated the real value of their weapon. While the machine guns concentrated fire on main approach axes, riflemen with Garands maintained such intense fire volume on the flanks that the Japanese initially believed they were facing intact machine gun positions throughout the line. Continuous semi-automatic fire, reloads in seconds, sustained fire without pause. The Japanese, armed with Arisaka Type 38 and Type 99 bolt-action rifles, couldn't match the volume of fire. Each pause to operate the bolt was a pause in their ability to suppress. The Americans had no such pause. By dawn, when the Japanese withdrew, the body counts revealed a surprising truth. Most Japanese casualties had come from rifle fire, not machine gun fire. Something impossible with bolt-action rifles. Around one of Basilone's machine gun positions, 38 Japanese bodies were found. But around rifleman positions, hundreds more. A captured Japanese lieutenant later stated, "Your riflemen fire like our machine guns. How can we advance against this?" The question had no answer. John Basilone received the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions that night. But the real hero was the rifle in the hands of every American rifleman. The M1 Garand had transformed static defense into flexible threat response system. American squads no longer needed to establish fixed machine gun positions to create defensive fire volume. Each man with a Garand was a fire position. This created tactical flexibility that Japanese tactics couldn't penetrate. And the Japanese, as the Germans would discover later in Europe, faced not just better tactics, but superior mathematics. Normandy, France, July 1944. The German LXC Corps, defending the St. Lo sector, faced the relentless advance of American forces through the bocage, the terrain of fields surrounded by dense hedgerows that characterized the region. Fighting was brutal, waged at short distances where German doctrine of long-range precision fire became irrelevant. What mattered was accurate fire volume delivered quickly. Captured documents from the LX Corps reveal growing dread about American firepower. A field report after fighting in St. Lo in July 1944 stated, "The individual American soldier possesses more firepower than a German Lanzer with MG support. Their squads don't need to establish machine gun positions. Each man is a fire position. This makes it impossible to predict their attack axes." Flexibility was key. While German units needed to establish MG-34 or MG-42 positions to create suppressive fire, sacrificing mobility and telegraphing their intentions, American squads could move and shoot simultaneously. An 8-man squad with Garands had the equivalent suppressive firepower of a German light machine gun, but distributed across 8 mobile positions. Suppressing such a unit required concentrated fire on multiple targets simultaneously. something German doctrine wasn't prepared to execute. Another internal German document, this from an unidentified Hauptmann, captain, was even more direct. We captured American rifles. We tested them. One man with this rifle equals 3 of ours with Kar 98K. They have millions. We do the math, and the math condemns us. The word condemns wasn't hyperbole. It was recognition of mathematical reality. German prisoners of war captured in France regularly tried to discard their K98Ks and pick up M1 Garands from fallen American soldiers. German officers had to issue orders prohibiting the practice, a devastating testimony of superiority recognized by the enemy itself. The rifle that Beck had dismissed in 1936 as unnecessary complication had become the object of desire of every German soldier who faced it in combat. A Wehrmacht technical intelligence report from August 1944, captured in archives and now in British military files, stated, "The M1 rifle demonstrates mass production techniques that we cannot replicate. Components show precise tolerances maintained across thousands of examples. Parts interchangeability is total. Reliability under field conditions exceeds our bolt-action rifles. Sustained fire volume exceeds machine gun positions. Enemy squad suppressive fire is continuous, with no observed pause for bolt manipulation. Conventional suppression tactics are ineffective against units equipped with semi-automatic rifles." The report concluded with an urgent recommendation for accelerated development of German semi-automatic rifles. But in August 1944, with German industry collapsing under Allied strategic bombing, such recommendation was useless. The industrial war was already lost. The M1 Garand's reliability under extreme conditions became legendary even among enemies. In the winter of 1944-45, during the Battle of the Bulge, temperatures dropped to 20 degrees Celsius. German G43 semi-automatic rifles froze regularly, their gas mechanisms failing in extreme temperatures. The M1 Garand kept functioning. American soldiers reported that their Garands operated even after days of exposure to extreme cold, without significant maintenance. In the South Pacific, in opposite conditions, 90% humidity and 40°C temperatures, where metal rusted in days and wood warped in hours, the M1 Garand operated for months. Marine riflemen in Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima consistently reported that their rifles functioned regardless of mud, sand, salt water, or dense vegetation. The combination of precise production tolerances with robust design had created a weapon that was more reliable under extreme stress than simpler rifles with more field history. This wasn't accident. It was intentional engineering applied to the reality of industrial warfare. The transformation of American infantry combat doctrine around the M1 Garand was profound and lasting. Before the Garand, American infantry tactics followed European models: bolt-action rifles for precision fire, heavy machine guns for suppression, maneuver under cover of concentrated fire. With the Garand, each squad became self-sufficient in firepower. It was no longer necessary to wait for machine guns to be positioned. Each rifleman could provide his own suppressive fire. This accelerated maneuvers, increased flexibility, and multiplied tactical options available to platoon and squad leaders. The American 8-man squad with Garands could execute fire and movement tactics that previously required entire platoons. Half the squad suppressed while half maneuvered, then roles reversed. Simple, efficient, devastating, and impossible for enemies armed with bolt-action rifles to replicate without extensive preparation and dedicated machine gun support. The strategic impact was measurable. Post-war studies conducted by the United States Army estimated that the M1 Garand alone increased American infantry combat effectiveness by 40 to 60% compared to forces equipped with bolt-action rifles. This meant that an American division equipped with Garands had the effective combat power of 1.4 to 1.6 divisions armed with bolt-action rifles, assuming equivalent training and morale. Multiply that factor across dozens of American divisions in multiple war theaters, and the scale of the advantage becomes overwhelming. It wasn't that American soldiers were individually better marksmen. Interwar studies showed that German marksmanship was generally superior. It was that each American soldier carried a weapon that multiplied his combat power by a factor that training alone couldn't overcome. Democracy applied to firepower. Each man, a suppression unit. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. November 28, 1944. Oberst Gerhard Wilk, commanding elements of the 275th Infantry Division in the defense of this dense and bloodied forest, sat in his improvised command post, a concrete bunker built years earlier as part of the Reich's border defenses. On his table, illuminated by the dim light of kerosene lamps, were casualty reports from his units after weeks of brutal combat against the American 1st Infantry Division. The numbers didn't make sense. His forces, occupying prepared defensive positions with clear fields of fire, supported by MG-42 machine guns that fired 1,200 rounds per minute, were suffering disproportionate casualty rates in direct infantry engagements. American formations advanced through the dense forest with an aggressiveness that defied logic. German tactics depended on stopping attackers under concentrated machine gun fire, followed by counterattacks while enemies retreated or consolidated positions. But the Americans didn't stop. They moved and fired simultaneously, something that should be impossible for rifle infantry without establishing machine gun positions first. Wilk had requisitioned captured American rifles from dead or wounded soldiers. 3 M1 Garands were brought to the command post. He examined them personally, disassembling the mechanisms, studying the engineering. The gas system was elegant in its simplicity. The en-bloc clip allowed reloading in seconds. He took one of the rifles outside the bunker and fired. The action cycled smoothly. There was no pause between shots, just pulling the trigger repeatedly. He emptied the 8-round clip in less than 5 seconds, maintaining reasonable aim on a tree trunk at 50 meters. Then he picked up his own K98K and fired 5 shots with it. It took almost 15 seconds, operating the bolt after each shot. The revelation was devastating. Each American soldier had the fire capability that German tactics reserved for specialized machine gun teams. An American platoon of 40 men had firepower equivalent to 3 German platoons. It wasn't that Americans were braver or better trained soldiers. It was that they had solved the war with engineering and factories. Wilk returned to his bunker and wrote in his personal diary, later captured after the surrender of the Aachen garrison, where he would command the final defenses. I understand now. We are not losing to better tactics or braver soldiers. We are losing because they solved the war with engineering and factories. Each of their soldiers has the weapon we give only to our best marksmen, multiplied by millions. There is no tactic that overcomes this, only mathematics that condemns us. Beck was wrong. We were all wrong. The semi-automatic rifle wasn't unnecessary complication. It was force multiplier we couldn't match. They beat us not with superior generals, but with superior engineers and industry that turned design into avalanches. The entry ended there. There was nothing more to say. The arrogance of 1936 had transformed into bitter understanding of 1944. The mathematics were inescapable. The final statistics tell a story of permanent transformation of modern warfare. I-4 8572, M1. Garand rifles were produced between 1937 and 1957, with approximately 4.5 million manufactured during World War II years. The reliability rate under combat conditions was remarkable, less than 1% failure rate in field use. The volume of fire advantage was consistent across all theaters, 3 to 4 times more sustained fire than Axis bolt-action rifles. The operational legacy extended far beyond World War II. The M1 Garand remained the standard United States infantry weapon until 1963, serving through the Korean War, where it continued demonstrating superiority over Chinese and North Korean bolt-action rifles, and into the early Vietnam War. Combat effectiveness studies conducted in the 1950s and 1960s estimated that the M1 Garand alone had increased American infantry combat effectiveness by 40 to 60% compared to forces equipped with bolt-action rifles, assuming parity and other factors. On January 26, 1945, General George S. Patton, Jr. wrote a letter to General Levin H. Campbell, Jr., Chief of Ordnance of the War Department, on the official letterhead of his Third Army. The first line stated, In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. Patton wasn't given to empty praise. His words carried the weight of experience across France, across Germany, across hundreds of combats where the rifle in the hands of his soldiers had proven decisive time and again. Patton's praise wasn't for the most accurate rifle, or the most powerful, or the most technically advanced. It was for the rifle that worked. Always, under any condition, in any climate, in the hands of any soldier. Robust simplicity produced at mass scale, the essence of winning industrial warfare. The contrast with Axis perspectives was illuminating. General Heinz Guderian, one of the principal architects of German mechanized warfare, wrote in his post-war memoirs, "We underestimated the significance of the American semi-automatic rifle. We thought it was unnecessary luxury. We discovered it was force multiplier we couldn't match. They beat us not with superior generals, but with superior engineers and factories that turned engineering into avalanches." The admission was remarkable coming from a German general, whose reputation for tactical brilliance remains undisputed. But Guderian had learned what Beck never lived to fully comprehend. In modern industrial warfare, individual tactical superiority is irrelevant against production superiority, combined with pragmatic innovation. Interrogations of captured German officers after the war consistently revealed the same pattern of recognition. A Wehrmacht major, captured in the Rhineland in March 1945, told his interrogators, "You Americans fight your wars like you produce your automobiles. Each soldier is equipped identically. Each rifle functions identically. Exchange parts between different rifles. Simple, efficient. We Germans make each weapon individually perfect, but we don't have enough. You make each weapon good enough, but you have millions. In long war, millions of good enough beats thousands of perfect." The observation captured the fundamental philosophical difference between German and American approaches to industrial warfare. The Germans sought individual excellence. The Americans sought mass sufficiency. The M1 Garand's legacy extended far beyond its direct contributions to Allied victory. It permanently proved that in modern industrial warfare, the democratization of firepower, placing advanced capability in the hands of every soldier, is more effective than concentrating capability in specialized weapons operated by specialists. Each American soldier became a complete tactical fire unit, eliminating combat doctrines that dominated warfare since Napoleon. The concentration of machine gun fire, the fundamental tactic of warfare since 1914, was challenged by the concept of distributed but intense rifle fire. American platoons no longer needed to maneuver around fixed machine gun positions. Each squad carried its own suppressive firepower. This concept, democratization of firepower through mass-produced superior individual armament, became a permanent cornerstone of American military doctrine. It led directly to the development of the M14, then the M16, the M4, and modern modular systems. The philosophy remains unchanged. Equip each soldier with individual multiplying advantage, then produce those advantages in overwhelming numbers. The side that does this doesn't need tactical excellence. It has absolute mathematical superiority. Tactics can compensate for small capacity disparities. Training can multiply individual effectiveness. But when one side equips each soldier with 3 to 4 times the sustained firepower of the other, and then produces millions of those individual advantages, no amount of tactical brilliance can overcome the brutal arithmetic. The final irony was that the M1 Garand didn't win the war alone. No single weapon wins wars. But it multiplied the effectiveness of each American soldier by a factor sufficient that, combined with industrial superiority in all other aspects, tanks, artillery, aircraft, ships, trucks, fuel, ammunition, it made Allied victory not just probable, but mathematically inevitable. General Beck's arrogance in January 1936, examining intelligence reports about an experimental American rifle and dismissing it as unnecessary complication, perfectly encapsulates the fundamental failure of Axis military thinking. They saw war through the lens of tactical excellence and engineering perfection. The Americans saw war through the lens of mass production and pragmatic sufficiency multiplied by industrial scale. By 1945, it was clear which philosophy had won. The M1 Garand was its most perfect symbol, not the most perfect rifle ever made, but the good enough rifle, produced in millions, that transformed each American soldier into a force multiplier that no Axis army could match.